Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. I see folks saying hello in the chat, which is wonderful. Please keep um, sharing who you are and where you're from. It's so wonderful to have you join us, whether you're here with us live right now or watching this recording later. This is the second event in our Symposium series about intention with technology. So this 4 months we're talking about engaging technology with curiosity, meaningful boundaries in homes and in schools. And today we are focusing on early childhood education and what it looks like to engage with wonder and purpose and how technology supports that, and how we can engage it really purposefully. So I'm really eager to begin our conversation, to introduce our panelists. And before we really begin, I want to acknowledge that actually all three of our wonderful panelists happen to be in Minneapolis. And this has been an incredibly difficult and traumatic week for Minnesotans and for all of us who are seeing these things unfold. I wanted to name that and thank our panelists so much for still being here with us today for this really intentional conversation, and just acknowledge that you and probably a lot of people here are coming with some grief. And we do want to share a resource. We're going to share it in the chat now. For those of you who maybe in schools or in your homes are navigating how to talk with children and young people about the news that we're all hearing, we have a resource that you can find on our website, and we'll share it here in the chat for talking with children of different ages about difficult news that is happening. And so thank you again to our panelists for being here this morning. So to begin to talk about technology and the support that it can be, the ways that we can use it well, we are going to start with Fred Rogers. I want to share that if for those of you who might have engaged with anything from the Fred Rogers Institute in the past few years, you probably know that we talk a lot these days about what Fred Rogers called the 6 fundamentals of learning and growing. We use this as kind of a framework for all of our work right now. We'll share again a bit about that in the chat so you can look more into the 6 fundamentals, but I want to specifically call out today that this list of 6 fundamental things that Fred Rogers said we all need for learning and growing, those 6 were named in his book, Mr. Rogers Talks About Parents, in a chapter when he was talking about television. He was talking about kindergarten readiness and what do young children need to be able to be ready for kindergarten. And he was talking about how can television, the brand new media of the time, how can television support kindergarten readiness and learning readiness? And so that is particularly relevant today when we're going to be talking about technology now, how technology can or can't be supportive of the fundamentals of growing and learning in early childhood. So we will refer back to those 6. I'll name them quickly. A sense of self-worth, a sense of trust, curiosity, the capacity to look and listen carefully, times of solitude, and of course, play. So we'll refer to those. With that, I'm going to ask our panelists to introduce themselves. These are all wonderful people we've been connected to recently, and I'm just really eager for this conversation. So I will ask you to go ahead and say hello. Erin, if you're willing to start.
Sure. Thank you so much for the warm and centering gathering moment that you were able to offer us this morning. So I'm Erin Walsh. I am the co-founder of Spark and Stitch Institute. So we translate the latest research in child and adolescent development with a specific focus on media's impact on child and adolescent development into more easy to understand language for adults who care for who care for kids. And then we stitch that science to practical strategies. So I spend a lot of time reading the research and talking to research scientists and then bringing that information to people who care for kids. I'm also an author, a parent, and a human trying to make sense of this world alongside children and teens.
Thank you. John?
Hello, everyone. My name is John Sessler. Thank you, Emma and Erin and Sheila, for inviting me to be part of this important conversation. I'm exactly where I need to be this morning. And hearing the words of Fred Rogers just really is poignant. So my name is John Sessler again. I am the co-founder of What Cement Education Strategies, specializing in curriculum and content development for educators, caregivers, and children alike, really focusing on the use of technology and media in developmentally appropriate ways and connecting that to the best practices that we know work for children and the learning sciences. Before that, I was the director of professional learning for PBS Kids under the Ready to Learn grant. And the Ready to Learn grant was funded by the US Department of Education for over 20 years until its termination this past spring. But I will speak from that point of view as well, just from all the incredible content that was created over the course of that grant and is still being created by PBS Kids. I worked with amazing colleagues in the public media field and at stations across the country that were developing content for educators, caregivers, and children, and still a huge advocate for public media. And of course, we'll be also speaking from my vantage point as a consultant working with educators and organizations. So thank you again. Really excited to learn from all of you joining as well. So thank you.
Thank you, John. Sheila?
Good. Hello, everyone. Good morning. It's so good to be here with you. I agree with our other panelists and so many people in the community this morning that this is a great place to be at such a difficult time. We all need the support of other people, something that Fred Rogers was so good at reaffirming in us. So I'm the director of the Child Development Laboratory School at the University of Minnesota. I forgot about it until I started to think about what I was going to introduce myself, what I was going to say to introduce myself. But I'm also a consultant for a children's show through PBS. I've been a consultant for Cyber Chase and for Count on Junebug, which is a series of shorts about math learning for very young children on PBS Kids. And then I teach some courses at the University of Minnesota and at Hamlin focused on environmental education, nature-based learning, and early childhood. And I'm so glad to be with you here for this discussion today.
Great. Thank you all so much. And I want to lift up something each of you pointed out, which we're eager to learn and hear from all of you who are joining us. So please continue to share your thoughts and comments in the chat. And if you have a question that you want to have posed to the panelists, please go ahead and share that in the Q&A feature so we make sure we find it. We're not going to hold a Q&A till the end. We'll just integrate questions as we can as they come in. So please, everyone, engage in this conversation. And so now that we know who's here and the incredible expertise and experience that's joining us for the conversation, we're going to start with Mr. Rogers. So we're going to watch a clip together. We'll just watch about 2.5 minutes of an episode that was released in March of 1999. We're going to drop into the middle of a moment. So I'll set the scene for you. Mr. Rogers has come in and he has taken off the jacket and put on the sweater and shoes. And we've walked over into his side room where he has a computer. So when we start this clip, Mr. Rogers is showing us the internet browser on his computer in 1999. So we'll have a little moment with him showing us how this computer works and then sharing some thoughts about it. So we'll watch this, and then panelists, I'm just going to ask you the simple question of what did you notice, and we'll use that to start our discussion. So with that, Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood.
Light. And the fish? There, the fish look hungry, don't they? They just go up and down and up and down. Let's see what's in the refrigerator. There's milk and orange juice and cheese. And close the door of the refrigerator and look, there's the table with all kinds of craft things. Now let's take a look at the sink, the kitchen sink, and see what happens there. The water turns on. Now let's go back and use the trolley to get into the neighborhood of make-believe. The computer neighborhood of make-believe. There it is. And King Friday's bowing. Queen Sarah's waving. Prince Tuesday's waving. Henrietta's waving. What about X? There's X making his wings go. You know what I was thinking? Oh, look, here's a case. Wonder what's in there. It's a violin. Always something different around here. Let's go back to the kitchen. And I think I'd like to go to the real kitchen. You know, your own imagination is far more wonderful than any computer could ever be. You know why? You're a living human being, and a computer is just a machine. Human beings are far more wonderful than machines. Let's go set up our own neighborhood of make-believe model in the real kitchen and think about it. Come on. But first, I think we should feed the real fish. They looked hungry. Yeah. Good for you, fish. I like real fish much better than any computer fish. Now we'll set up this model of ours.
All right, Sheila, John, Erin, what did you notice?
So many. I can jump in. I know we could just talk about this clip for the rest of the time, probably, and pull out so many insights that are relevant to our interactions with children and technology today. I just two things, and then I know John and Sheila will take it away. But I noticed something internally that I want to note, which is just a sense of groundedness and calm and relationship with Mr. Rogers. And so sometimes when we're talking about media, we often just talk about what's on the screen, but the way that he was modeling, exploring that space also changed my own. Ooh, like I needed to have a little couple minutes with Mr. Rogers this morning. And I know children experience that as well. And then the other thing that I noticed that I know we're going to talk about it is language of I wonder. I wonder what is inside this chest. Oh, did you notice the sort of open-ended, slow exploration of a digital space is such powerful modeling of what can go right when we're thinking about the kinds of conditions we want to engage with media with. So I'll make that short because I know there's a lot to say.
I can jump in. The first thing I noticed is I remember watching this with my own children, who at the time were 6, 4, and 2, and so just time flies. What a wonderful little clip back in history and thinking about the ways that we use computers. One of the things that really stood out to me was I remember those moments of being a parent and sitting alongside my child, exploring something like this together. And often today we see children engaging with technology on their own, and how important it is to have an adult there. And like Erin said, like having an adult there who's such a calming presence, and really using it as a tool of exploration, to kind of deepen the relationship and then say, like, let's go out and see and let's go out and do something together. That is really wonderful. And just the affirmation of that, that individuals and even fish, like that living beings are, are really great and are a little more special than those computers ever will be. And I think that that affirmation of each other and of other beings is so important.
Mm.
I'll just build upon that, Sheila. What really caught my attention is just what a masterclass this is in co-viewing and co-engagement with technology and media. And although the technology has evolved quite a bit since 1999, we can take so much from just this 2-minute clip and just Mr. Rogers' authentic curiosity as he is exploring that digital space and clicking on the different images. And I know that PBS Kids still does this very well, and the producers they work with, creating these playful learning experiences that really open the world up to the child to play the show and explore the world of the show through the games. And so I saw that. I also pulled out a quote as I was watching this last night. I think it just resonates as we were thinking about the advancements of AI, and there'll always be new technologies, but this quote really resonated. I'm going to look at my other screen here. Although children's outsides may have changed a lot, their inner needs have remained very much the same. Society seems to be pushing children to grow faster, but the developmental tasks have remained constant. And to me, that just really encapsulates the importance of the human interactions and these simple interactions we can make during the engagement with technology and media. And that's just so beautifully done in this clip.
Can I add one little note? Because I think, John, as you're talking about the pace of technology, and I think we're all looking at that browser maybe with a bit of like, wow, time really does fly. And in some ways, his observation and offering to the child viewer of like, this is a machine, in some ways, as we're viewing that, seems obvious now. But as we think about situating these kinds of developmentally appropriate practices in today's media landscape, it's not always obvious to a child that it is a machine. And as AI races forward, I think those sort of adult scaffolding around like let's remember that this is a machine, and what can a machine do and what can a human do, that was so beautifully modeled in that clip, I think is maybe more important than ever in this moment, and as we race into AI integration into children's media. So what a beautiful reminder of how important that comment is.
Yes, I let's stick with that since, AI is such a thing we're all thinking and talking about. For given that this conversation and this audience is thinking about early childhood and early childhood settings, I know these are questions you all have explored. So what are the things that you think about in terms of the teachers and directors who are preparing and thinking about how and why do we integrate AI? What does that look like to support children? What are the things that you think about as being really important?
I will just start with one thing. We had a researcher, so we're a laboratory school, and researchers often come to us and say, we have this thing that we want to try, and this was one where we said, this is not something that we're interested in figuring out right now, but it is something that we need to think about. But there are new AI tools being developed to supervise groups of children and then give summaries about their development. And some teachers might feel like this is a nice little way to document children's learning and help plan for curriculum. But for us right now, we really think that relationship and teachers really deeply observing and getting to know children and planning thoughtful curriculum is a very important part of the teaching process. But we also know that these tools are being developed. So that's just something that I've been really thinking about is how will that influence the classroom and the role of teachers in the what makes things a little bit easier for teachers and what takes away sort of the essential parts of teaching is something that I've been thinking pretty deeply about because even though we passed on this technology as as a place of research, we know that it's something that other programs have started to look at and start to integrate.
Something I always espoused and really leaned into around the professional development for educators on the topic of media use and technology use is just building your own self-awareness and your own media literacy skills. I think that's so critical, especially as we have all grown up with technology. We use it constantly. It's in the palm of our hands, but just being more mindful of our own use, our own modeling of it for young children, Of course, there's going to be, again, advancements in AI that we can't even dream up. But just that reminder to both your points, Erin and Sheila, that media is created and technology is created by humans and coded by humans. And just that simple reminder, and that reminder to the young learners too, that they too can be creators of content, and we need to encourage them to create with the media and realize that media and technology is all created by humans, and that there are biases, there are all those human flaws that are put into the creation and development of media and technology as well.
Yeah, and I'll just note, I think in many ways, you can probably hear in our answers, like we don't have a ton of robust data on this yet. Like these tools are really new. So it's hard to be like, well, looking at this 10-year longitudinal study and its impact on 2-year-olds, I think because the technology is changing so fast, one thing that I think is worth noting and thinking about is just the design of tools. So a lot of commercial AI products being marketed towards early childhood or sort of adult base products that are then sort of built like the overlay of it being quote unquote child friendly. And so given John's like really beautiful reminder that these are tools created by humans, like they're designed to do specific things, I think as we're using a lens of just what would we use and what would we pass on, is really thinking critically about, was child development at the core from the start of the design process? Who was engaged in the design process? Were there any children in the co-design process? Because a lot, unfortunately, of the tools that are rushing to the shelves are not made with children in mind. They may have things that make adults feel good, like letters, numbers, colors, like we've seen in the app space for a long time. But in terms of actually embedded in those core developmental principles, I think we want to look to those smaller projects coming out of universities, where they really have tried to build these smaller models that are specifically targeted at best use cases for early childhood. So I think it's a time to be very slow and thoughtful as we, in terms of our decision making process around AI tools marketed towards young children in particular.
And I just add, I encourage everyone to check out the statement that was released in the fall by some incredible developmental scientists and psychologists and learning scientists. Some names that you might be familiar with: Kathy Hirsch-Pesic, Roberta Gulenkoff, Ellen Galinsky. They all signed on to the statement around the use of AI and development of AI tools for 0 to 3-year-olds. And just, we don't have enough research, we don't have enough information, we need more guardrails. That statement's out there. There's a Brookings article written by Kathy as well, so I encourage you all to check out that statement.
You. I heard each of you say something that reminded me of a question that has been connected to a lot of the work that's happened here at Fred Rogers Institute, which is how does this thing, this new technology, this policy, this program idea, how does it encourage relationships and interactions between teachers and their students, or how does it detract from that? And I heard you each kind of point to that as I wonder your thoughts on, could that be a useful grounding question when early childhood educators are thinking about whether it's a new AI tool or any sort of tech or media? What about that question of how does this support relationships? And are there other kind of filter questions that you think about when we're deciding how and what to engage with?
I can start. I use some tools in the field, as they say, with the children, usually outside, that I really think support the relationship between children and teachers and between, all of us and technology. And I love how, John reminded us like that these tools are built by human beings, and the goal, of many of those human beings is to excite us about learning, to help us discover new things. So I use an app with the children called Merlin Bird ID, and we use that pretty often because sometimes children ask questions about things, and I usually answer with some inquiry-based questions of my own. But when they're ready to say, I just want to know the name of this bird or where, what does it look like? Because we can only hear it and we can't see it. There are wonderful apps out there. So Merlin Bird ID, iNaturalist are two that I use most often to really extend children's learning and to get them more curious about the world around them. I also, there's some really great, I mean, YouTube has everything, but there are really great videos, and one that I find myself watching with children more often is there's one where the frog is defrosting out of winter and how frogs like freeze solid and they're like this solid block of ice and like, hardly any heartbeat at all and how they wake back up and then just hop away is fascinating. And children love that. And so I think that technology being able to show us things and that we can't normally see with young children, views of underwater. Sometimes children are really curious about what a lake looks like. We're in Minnesota, and sometimes it can be scary. And using tools of technology to help children learn about the world, and so thinking about it as not such a scary place, but the more information we can have about something, the better. And so I think that those are some of the ways that I use it, sort of outdoors with children, just to extend their learning or to give them a little different view of the world around them.
I like it's taking all of my impulse control not to like open up a second screen and like Google frozen frog. So everyone, this will be our post webinar activity. That sounds delightful. I just love the question. I love this. I love the practical, like real examples of ways that we're using this framework of child development. We can find ways to use media that's like inquiry based and relationship based. And I noted somebody in the chat had shouted out Dr. Katie Davis's book, Technology's Child. And I do think that framework, when you ask, like, what is it? What are these ingredients? We do, I think a lot of us have these things we're looking for. Like, is it engaging on their previous knowledge or building on their previous knowledge? Is it, active engagement? Is it encouraging social interaction? And I do think that Dr. Katie Davis's framework of like self-directed community supported media use is it's a really helpful one as that broad framework of like, is the child and the educator sort of controlling the media or is it controlling them through persuasive design techniques and other ways that are just sort of trying to keep them on the screen for longer? And then is it sort of embedded in these relationships, whether it's peer-to-peer relationships or educator-child relationships? And that can be that helpful first pass where we're thinking, is this self-directed, community-supported media use, or is this sort of isolated, passive media use where the tech is controlling the child instead of them bringing their imagination to that? So I love that shout out in the chat and just wanted to elevate that as like a general framework that we can use for first pass on these kinds of things.
And going back to my time at PBS Kids, I was thinking about some of the conversations I've had with teachers and just some incredible teachers out there that would get inspiration from the technology or the media and the games themselves as they were playing and then recreating those games in the physical space. Maybe they had the digital games available during center time or other times that children could interact with media, but then they were inspired, these teachers, to create games that explored force and motion or ramps and just so many ideas, I think, that are inspired when teachers actually just to get their hands on these games and play with them or the other tools and think about the ways that they can recreate that physical interaction in a way that is really exciting for the young learners. And then also, just to your point, Sheila, too, is thinking about these other tools out there that really allow for the child to create and just as simple as Google Slides, an amazing way to think about like how children are telling stories through the tools that are available out there and new ways to tell their stories and get their ideas out there and document their learning through these digital tools. So just loved all those ideas that were shared.
And I want to put everybody at ease in knowing that we are tracking all of the ideas and references and apps and books and things that are being mentioned both here and in the chat, and we will share all of that in a list with everybody. So you don't need to frantically write all these down. We will do that for you. I love hearing about these really like wonderful options that encourage creativity and exploration and curiosity. And I'm thinking about something, Erin, that you and I talked about in our last conversation of caring adults, educators, parents, others, really wanting to know, is there a structure to be following when it comes to engaging with technology? Is there a number of minutes of screen time that is acceptable? Is there a certain way that we should be doing this? I want to give you the chance to just briefly speak to that. And then I really want to hear what Sheila and John have to contribute to that idea, this idea of, is there something we just need to know to get it right?
Yeah. And I think that and we spoke about this in the first session, and the question that you brought up as you're thinking about getting it right is often around time for parents. It's like, okay, how many minutes, how many hours, how much screen time? And I think in the first session, we spent a lot of time kind of unpacking that. And in our answers, even in exploring so far, it's so clear that as we look at children's media, I think time is still relevant. I don't think we want to throw time out. But I think for a long time, we've used that as sort of the primary marker of a good or bad use of media, or like a good or bad parent, to be honest, as we're communicating with caregivers who are asking educators, the trusted adults in their kids' lives, for guidance. And what we know in the research is that really time is one variable, but not necessarily the only or most important variable. It's certainly what we want to be looking at is for what, with whom, and what is it crowding out? What are not just in terms of other activities, but other opportunities to build skills. So we can even think about that in terms of emotional regulation, right? So I might be within the right number of screen time hours, but if every time I'm using a screen as a 3-year-old, it's when I'm frustrated or overwhelmed and angry, and I'm using swiping through a tablet to calm myself down, I might only have an hour of screen time, but it might be crowding out the opportunity to learn some emotional regulation strategies, right? Just as an example. Whereas I also might be using a tool that's really helpful to remind me to take my big belly breaths and do that with a caring adult. So that sort of nuance and detail really does matter. Now, we don't have great evidence that under 18 months, like introducing media in order to unleash incredible benefits, like we don't have a lot of evidence that is like, yes, we should be introducing 6-month-olds to tablets right away, or else they're going to miss out on something. After that sort of, around that 2-year-old mark, a lot of it really is around these questions of what's the content, what is it crowding out? What is the purpose? What's happening around them? What are the kinds of relational, what's the relationship context? So I think in some ways parents and educators can get frustrated sometimes, like, just tell me which apps and the number of minutes. So I love the practical examples, because I think there are some beautiful resources that we can actually practically point people to. But Mr. Rogers also just invited us to be so curious about the child and to be curious about ourselves. And that is, in many ways, the invitation from screen time research, is to be really curious about how kids are interacting with these tools and how it shapes our interactions, our inquiry, and our learning.
And I would just say one of the things that we think is really important in early childhood is to use technology as a tool to support what's happening, but not as a destination of its own. And so we don't have technology as a regular part of our routine or of our schedule, but it's a tool that we pull out when it could be useful, when it can extend learning, when it can answer a child's question. Or sometimes we have a language immersion classroom, and sometimes if the teacher is out sick, it's a really great tool to bring in a native speaker of that language via technology to lead a song, or to read a story in a way that one of our classroom teachers might not be able to at the moment. And so just really thinking about it as a supplement and as something that can support the teachers and support the children and even support the families, right? We can send these links home if we, read a story in group time and the children had a lot of questions about it. We can send a link to that. Um, there are some stories that I think are best read by the author themselves. Owl Moon is one of those that
Mm.
I go to all the time, and hearing the author read it themselves is a special treat that I will sometimes pull out. There's also, if any of you know the Pizza story, there's one, and I think it's Chevy Chase that's reading it. Anyway, very funny. So you can extend children's learning by having a different person read the book, or we still use books on tape. And Jamaica's Find, I love that book on tape. It is a little bit older of a technology, but it's one that really helps children connect, and they can listen to it again, and we can ask questions and still be in dialogue with each other. But like I said, like children are the catalyst, and their curiosity is sort of leading the way, and that we don't plan for the technology in and of itself. We just use it as a way to scaffold and support them.
Thank you. Now, I'll just add, Sheila, to that, to the looking at the six fundamentals, this idea of trust and trusting that you as a family or as a classroom community can create some expectations together around media use and create a media plan together. I'm a big proponent of that. I think we have to remember to trust young learners that they are working on their self-regulation, yes, but they can also provide some great ideas for what time of day is the best to use media, what kind of tools to use for certain tasks. And this, thinking about those media literacy skills too, really engaging in that curiosity together. Like, if you have a question, where could we go to find that answer? What are the different outlets, the different media resources that we could use? They may come up with some ideas that you haven't even thought of. So this idea of just co-creation of a media plan, or setting expectations together, and that the child has agency in some of the decisions they make around their media use, and when and where they get to watch, listen, engage with media, I think is really important.
Speaking of decision making, we had a question come in that I think is really a good one. So it says, Sheila, you mentioned being consistently pitched by researchers as at a lab school. Many educators are already overwhelmed by new initiatives. How do you think about the difference between child-centered technology that adds to a teacher's cognitive load versus technology that actually reduces it? Um, I thought that was an interesting question. How do you think about distinguishing those types of tech that are being offered to you?
Yeah, and when I think about like the options that we have, we really want technology that supports our relationship with families, that increases communication, and that lets us focus on, right, like the time with children and engaging with children. There are, of course, tools that we use. We use an app called Story Park to communicate with our families, to share documentation, to share photos around what children are doing at school and how they're progressing. It allows us to kind of chart their development, which is really great. It has wonderful apps. We use the work sampling and the early childhood indicators of progress for Minnesota. And I also use the environmental kinship guide as a way to support how children are growing in their relationship with nature. And so those are all sort of technology tools that we utilize to communicate with families, but we, want to make sure that it is something that is supportive of the learning that is happening. And so when someone brings in a possible tool, is it going to be the focus of our react and of our relationship, or like is it going to add something? Even the one that I mentioned earlier, where the researchers, brought in the tool where they would have cameras and sort of record what was happening and then distill it down to the essentials of what children are doing and develop how they're developing in the classroom. There are some parts of that that are, I would say, attractive. Like it allows you to spend more time being with children. But I think it takes out an essential piece, which is that observation, that thoughtfulness. We know from some of the research that's been coming out about how AI sort of changes our usage of words as adults, how we are, how it sort of is the autocorrect and those things are not making us better spellers. Um, it's actually doing the opposite. It's making us a little bit lazy. And so we don't want that to happen with children, and we don't want that to happen with teachers in the classroom. We don't want it to take away our ability to be able to do these things on our own. So I think when I think about it, I think about things that will support teachers, but not take away the essentials of observation, assessment, relationship building, but that only adds to them.
Yeah. And I mean, one of Fred Rogers' six fundamentals is the capacity to look and listen carefully. And those fundamentals, of course, are not just about what young children need, they're about what we all need to continue to do. So yeah, that's a really good thing to point out. Does anybody else want to comment on that?
I'll just add to the importance of tech companies, media companies to take the advice of those experts in our classrooms and those parents and bring together focus groups. We see this happening more often, but it needs to be done a lot more. That we need to have more focus groups. We need to compensate teachers for being part of those focus groups and providing advice on content. But I hope that's something we see continuing in the field, and that the advice and the feedback and recommendations from teachers and caregivers and parents is taken into account and actually incorporated from the very start of the design of tech tools and whatever these tools evolve to become.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's just that's exciting to me. The design piece is exciting to me because we actually do see in studies that when media are designed with children's needs in mind, we do see better outcome. Like it is good practice. And so sometimes I think we get in this sort of all media is bad. It's like a toxic cesspool. And because a lot of commercially created products that where the bottom line is time, engagement, attention, are not serving young children. But when we see even, the research on the PBS Kids shows that are not designed to maximize time and attention, and then we look at children who maybe have more, it takes more effort for them to regulate their emotions, and we look at them transitioning off of PBS Kids shows, and those transitions go okay. And when we compare that to them transitioning off of apps that are designed to maximize time and attention, we see a lot more dysregulation, a lot more parent-child conflict. And that tells us that design matters and that we can design tools in ways that are supportive of parents at home who are juggling a lot, who might not be able to sit down next to their child every single moment. And we can remind them that there are some options. Also, then we can think about the incredible work that John and Shelia are doing in the classroom with educators and how those insights can be built in. So I know that we all know that, but it's helpful to reemphasize it at a time where there's so much fear and well-deserved attention to the harms, but that there are some really cool things happening in media space still when we engage young children and the people who know a lot about young children. In that sort of same spirit as Mr. Rogers. He didn't really love TV, so he made it better.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I mean, like I said, we use these apps to communicate. They really do support the relationships between parents and the school, between individuals and the community. There are ways that the teachers can talk to each other. There are ways to, so I think that you're so right that there are really wonderful benefits. We just have to be very thoughtful about how we bring it into our community, what we choose, and how it supports us.
Yeah. that you all just just spoke to like three other questions that have come in that are all kind of connected to this idea of design and how technology is made. So I'll kind of rephrase one of them to see if there's anything else that comes up for you. So this person wrote in and pointed out, Mr. Rogers used television screens, which was brand new at the time, to support regulation and connection and relationship. And today, Erin, like you were saying, there's this fear where we think of technology and human connection as opposites, like polarly opposed things. But this question is, from your perspective, what nuance are we missing when we frame it that way, and how can intention in our use and also intention in design shift technology from being disruptive to really being supportive of relationships in early childhood? And you've all been speaking to that the whole time, but that question is framed really well, so I wanted to pose it again and see if there's something more that comes for you.
I just wanted to share an example of a technology that we use sort of during a challenging time. So we like to spend a lot of time outside. And there have been more days, especially in the summer, where there has been unhealthy air quality due to climate change, wildfires, those sorts of things. It can be really hard to talk to children about the why, like why we can't go outside and that the air is dangerous and what that feels like. And so having moments where we can sit down and sort of center with children. There's an app, well, we use a website, airnow.gov, and it has a wonderful, you can tell that they asked some people, like, how can we make this really simple for you? But it has that little, everybody probably knows this by now, but that little half circle that shows like if it's in the green or if it's in the yellow or orange or red. And so we talk to the children about what that means when we sit down. And there's a particular child, and he said, can I see if we're in the yellow yet? Because he really wants to go outside. And so he's asking me to check in on this technology that is so important to us being able to keep children healthy and safe at school. And so he actually drew some pictures of it on his own. And he's like, I want a green day for tomorrow. Like just thinking about the ways that technology is helping him cope with something that is a little bit scary. And then one of the children came by the front desk, and we had been talking about how we use this app and the wildfires that were in Canada last summer. And she said, I hope it rains for 67 days in Canada. And I was like, how thoughtful, right? She's thinking about that this is impacting people, and that this technology lets us have a view of how it's impacting us, but it's impacting people all over the country and all over the world. And I love when children start to put that together.
Yeah, maybe I'll, unless John, you don't have anything, but I feel like I just spoke to that a little bit. So
Yeah, thank you. One thing I want to talk about is Fred Rogers used television to he built a relationship of trust with his viewers. Um, and I'd just like to talk about that idea of trust. And I've heard you all say that our job as the adult is to engage in our own building up our own media literacy so that we can trust ourselves to make decisions. Um, I think that trust is it's a really fascinating thing to me that this person was able to build relationships through a screen that still so many of us, I mean, I'm seeing it in the chat right now, have this real emotional connection to this person. And we can talk about what was it that Fred Rogers did that built that trust, and what are some of the similarities today when we're thinking about all this new stuff and the ways we engage with it? How do we keep trust at the center?
mm. I'm happy. I could, oh, good.
Wow.
Go ahead, John.
No, that's just
This is the classic
such
panel
a big
moment of like,
question.
I can't wait to hear what everyone has to say.
Yes. Um, Well, I think what just strikes me initially is what we were discussing earlier is that that reminder of the humans that are behind the development and creation of these tools. And um, now it is getting more complicated, right? Because we have AI creating content. We have content that we don't know, is that reality or is that a deep fake? And I think this will become an even more difficult issue to suss out. But, I think, again, it comes down to that human interaction and that trust we build from a very early age with a human, and that technology will never and should never replace that human interaction and the words that come directly from another caregiver or human's mouth to ensure safety and trust and comfort. So I'm probably babbling here, but it's just something that is continually on my mind as we are seeing the evolution, and just can't even fathom where AI and the content creation might go. And but if we start building the foundation of these skills early, the six fundamentals that just that drive to be curious and learn more from the very early age, because I think no matter what, we have to understand how these tools are made, how they are developed in ways that are drawing us in to use them for longer periods of time, to um, change the algorithm so we're even more addicted to them. We can start planting these seeds early on for young learners and the caregivers around them to kind of understand, so we're not just controlled by the devices and controlled by the technology.
Yeah, I think it's a beautiful prompt to engage children in. Like, how do we know? How can we trust this? How else might we know? What other source do we want to go check out? Who else might we ask? Because I do think, as John pointed out, this question of trust in the age of AI is so essential, because as we think about the way that sycophancy and praise and the ways that tools are designed to sort of make us kind of lull us right now, at least commercially available AI products, it's sort of this sense of trust that's like this balm of like, oh, you tell me everything I want to hear. And Fred Rogers actually did tackle some pretty tough things. Like, Fred Rogers actually sort of invited us into some complexity and acknowledged when things were hard, or acknowledged when things weren't simple. And I think through repetition and through quality content and through speaking directly to the child rather than through the sort of bells and whistles that can keep a child looking at a screen, but not developing a back and forth trusting relationship with a creator. So I think that is getting harder. Like, there is just so much more coming at us. And so I think that's actually one of those media literacy questions that's going to have to start early. How do we know who to trust? Who are the trusted adults that we can go to when we have a question about something that we see online? What else do we need to look at together? Or I'm not quite sure. This one's too tricky to figure out if we can trust it. But so I think we're also modeling that is tricky terrain for adults too, and we're helping sort of problematize this idea that if it comes out of a character that they recognize, like Mickey Mouse, who has now, a partnership with Sora AI, like, that we might still not, we're not sure, right? Because that's a machine, and now we have to go figure out who our trusted sources are.
And now I just want to share a little bit. I think so much of the trust that we grew to have with the relationship with Mr. Rogers was about his authenticity and
Mhm.
transparency, and his ability to sort of explore something with us, take us along in really meaningful ways. For me, we were talking about this the last time we met, but was about like taking us behind the screens to see how something is made, like crayons. And when you show people sort of the things that you don't know, and that you're curious about, and it really helps build that trusting relationship in a really wonderful way. And it affirms that we're, human beings who don't know everything. I wonder if, if Mr. Rogers were still making shows, if he might have a way to describe sort of how AI works, right? It
Mhm.
is the ideas of other people. And it is, a computer being able to sort all of the ideas of other human beings and how we don't appreciate that as much. But right, everything that AI can do is because a person can do that. It can't do
Mm.
anything that people can't do. It can do more than one person, but collectively, like it is, in a way, it is sort of our collective. But we are sort of losing control of it in some places. And I wonder how he might have described it to very young children, because I think that that would be a wonderful thing to explore.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and then I know that we're going to put it in the chat and we're going to follow up, but there sometimes we can get in this like everything is untrustworthy and AI slop is everywhere, and like we do have some trusted sources, and I know John has so many rich resources that many incredible people have built at PBS Learning Media, and work that you're, the Fred Rogers, and all of the beautiful media that is being made right now. It's just a good reminder sometimes when families are overwhelmed that we do have some bright spots where I feel like we can say like this is a trusted source and this content is good. And it's helpful for me when I'm working with caregivers to name that so that we don't feel like we're just constantly doing the work of sorting and curating, which is an exhausting job. I'm speaking a lot about the when we're working with caregivers side. It's certainly the job of an educator to really thoughtfully curate everything in the classroom, but I think pointing caregivers towards some trusted sources is still really important.
Yeah. Yeah.
They're
And like,
tired.
yeah.
They're tired. We're tired.
Yeah. Thank you so much. And like I said, we're going to share all of the resources that have been mentioned, and each of you has some specific resources, books, things that you have created and written, and we're going to be sharing those for sure with everybody who's registered or attended today. Um, and this last piece of the conversation, you all were talking about the way that Fred Rogers didn't shy away from
Mm,
uncertainty or scary things. Um, and it felt very full circle to me, because I'm thinking, as adults, we can do that. We can be honest with children about how we're not really sure about this too, and we're wondering, where is the trusted source? And I love that idea of just talking to children and young people about what do we think of this? Is this a machine, and how do we know? And inviting them into that wondering with us, and sharing how we are, what we're feeling and noticing and wondering. And that's so connected to what the very first resource we shared today, this talking with children about difficult things in the news, that we don't shy away from acknowledging what's real. He said anything that is human can be mentionable, and anything that is mentionable can be more manageable. And it doesn't mean that it's not scary or
mm,
sad or not confusing, um, but when we as adults can be brave and honest about what we are thinking, what
mm,
we're wondering about, what we're worried about, it goes such a long way toward at least letting children know they're not alone, and that we are the adults who will
mm,
care for them. Um, so I want to thank each of you so very much for this conversation. So much to that we will share with everyone, so that we can all keep learning from this conversation and all of the things that have spilled out of it. Um, I hope everyone is able to join us next month. Next month, we're going to be talking again, specifically about media and technology at home, and setting loving limits. Around what and how do we engage with that joyfully. So Thursday, February 19th is that conversation. We've shared the link to register. We'll also share links here to for our evaluation form. We want to hear from you, any ways we can improve these conversations, and also the Act 48 form if you're a Pennsylvania educator looking for Act 48 credit. Finally, two quick things coming up for the Fred Rogers Institute. Our in-person conference is July 8th and 9th of this summer, and we are open for proposals right now. So I know so many of you here today are doing really interesting, important work where you are, and if there's something you want to share at our conference, please submit a proposal. And if you've enjoyed this conversation, we have a new podcast actually that was released today in our new Listen to the Helpers podcast. So you can find that anywhere and hear more conversation from people like these three folks who are doing really wonderful, important work for children and young people. So we will go out with a song if you want to stay and listen. But Shelia, Erin, John, thank you so much. It was really lovely to be with you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. This was the right time to
Mhm.
be together. Thank you.
Yeah.